Now, let's look at this letter from Sasha Bennett, July 26, 2022. It's 8 pages long. Okay, so we're just going to look at a few things in this and compare it to the act itself and her responses, because this here is a letter that she wrote us in response to a correspondence that we sent to Minister Davis's office. So let's look at what she says in the letter. Legislation and policy indicates, Section 60 indicates that an issue related to a worker's entitlement to compensation shall be decided on a balance of probabilities, and where the evidence on each side of an issue is equally balanced, the issue shall be decided in favor of the worker. Let's look at some other things that we need to address here, Sasha. She also says that your recent pay stub and conversation confirms that you continue to work full-time and are earning above the annual maximum compensable ceiling. And based on the weight of evidence, I've decided that there is no entitlement to wage loss benefits at this time. Okay, so what exactly did she weigh? She weighed the actual earnings and the maximum compensable. That's it. That's it. What does the act actually state that she has to include? Well, right underneath section 20-4, it says that the decisions of the commission shall be based upon the real merits and justice of the case, as not actually bound to follow strict legal precedents. So that means that the maximum compensable is not really forced on any injured worker, really. And she had no actual evidence at all, only his actual pay. So she had no evidence or no facts to weigh as to any unfair results based on our living situation or our size of our family or medical needs that we had, how much our mortgage or our rent was at the time. She weighed absolutely none of that in her decision. And that's noted because it was not in this letter at all. There was absolutely no other facts used in her weight of decisions or weighing of the evidence, sorry. Then let's look at the exceptional circumstances, which says that no unfair or unintended results can occur. So nowhere in this letter did she ever reach out and actually talk to us about the fact that the maximum compensable kicked us out on the streets in August 5th, 2019. She did not discuss the fact that we had credit cards that we were planning to pay off that we never ever got paid off as a result of the maximum compensable in 2019. She did not discuss, even back at the time of the original injury, they didn't even discuss that he was put on the maximum compensable at that time, and we had plans to use the extra outside of the maximum compensable that he was making prior to this injury to do upgrades to the house, like shingles where our house was leaking. So nowhere ever since this injury happened has any of the workers discussed anything other than the maximum compensable and how much was actually being made, and the fact that they absolutely could not look at changing the maximum compensable, but the Act doesn't state that, and neither does the exceptional circumstances of EL01. Now let's look at EL01 benefit calculations. So it says here that the compensation is payable from the first day of lost earnings beyond the day of injury. And average weekly earnings shall be calculated on the basis of the amount earned in the period of 12 months immediately preceding the beginning of the loss of earnings. Or B, the rate of daily, weekly, monthly, or other regular remuneration that the worker was receiving at the beginning of the loss of earnings as a result of the injury, whichever is more equitable. So where in this did the ongoing calculations showing that an existing loss of earnings was still there? When did the commission actually prove Dustin was at no loss of earnings? And that is the only way that they can discontinue any compensation amounts, is when the calculation equals zero or negative. Because it always has to be in the best interest of the injured worker, and it has to take in an equitable earnings loss benefit is one which is fair and reasonable considering all the circumstances of a particular case. Well, in this letter that I'm referring to at the beginning, not once did anything other than his actual earnings come into her weight of evidence. So where is the actual weight of evidence using exceptional circumstances that will not cause unfair or unintended results ever happening? Sasha, where? Because it didn't happen with you when you did this. It didn't happen in 2018 when his original injury happened. It didn't happen in August of 2019 when the reoccurrence happened. There's no calculations whatsoever, only using the maximum compensable and his earnings at the time, and the fact that if his earnings did not go above or were less than the maximum compensable, then he wasn't getting anything. There is no legislation to back up those statements of yours. You did not weigh any evidence at all. None. There was no evidence weighed in your decision to discontinue his compensation. And not only was there no evidence weighed and no facts weighed, you also didn't do any of the calculations to prove that no loss of earnings existed. So you failed. You did not follow the policy. You didn't follow the law. You didn't follow the facts. And you didn't even get any of the extra weighable evidence that you should have been using. Would you mind explaining why you failed to include all of this in your decision making for that letter? I'm curious. How did you manage to come up with everything in this letter when none of the policies or the sections of the legislation support that letter?